Now, a lot of people are analyzing the previous British election and they're considering it to be unfair, specifically due to this. You got Reform UK, and they managed to get 14% of the votes, and they only get 1% of the seats. However, when you're looking at something like the Lib Dems, which got less votes than Reform UK, they got a massive number of seats. So I'm using Paul Joseph Watson video because he actually compiled this information. And you can see it better in this chart. The Lib Dems got 71 seats, and they have a total number of votes of close to 3.5 million, while Reform UK got 4 million votes, and they only got 4 seats, right? Now, the problem is that usually when people talk about democracy, they genuinely think about like what's popular, right? Many people don't understand the system and how it's operating, or they know about it, but it only comes up when their party loses an election. And this is the same in the United States. Like, the Electoral College operates so that it's not a democracy. Like, even if a president manages to get the popular vote, he may still not become president because of how the votes are being represented. And the system that I understand it very well, and it's actually a good system, because if it wasn't in place, then states that have fewer population would not be able to have much of a say in the elections. And all the candidates would only care about Texas, New York, California, and other places that have large populations, while completely ignoring the problems and the issues that come from smaller states. And you can see this when you look at the rural versus the urban area. Like, people in the rural area that live in the middle of nowhere next to Courage the Cowardly Dog, and it takes for them 2 hours to get to the closest gas station, they desperately need weapons in order to protect themselves and to be able to sleep well at night. Because if there's a hog that comes onto their property, by the time they call the police in order to remove it, the hog may even be gone. So they need a weapon in order to handle the situation right then and then. And it's also like, if you live in the middle of nowhere, you may be afraid of attacks, bandits, or other nefarious individuals. You want to know that you have a gun in order to defend yourself. Meanwhile, in the cities, people can call the cops. They arrive in less than 5 minutes, depending on the city you're in and the crime rate, of course. But, like, in most civilized places, you can actually call the cops and they will be there. So, like, people in the city feel safe, and they feel like they don't need guns, and they view guns as a danger, while people in the rural area do need guns. So, like, the question is, why should the people in the cities impose their will onto the people in the rural area? And that's where the Electoral College comes in, right? Like, places that don't have the same amount of people do require to have the representation. And that is the American system. The British system, I don't fucking understand it, man. I generally don't. I try to. Like, I understand the principles of it, but I don't know why they made it the way it is. Basically, it has advantage for parties that are old, right? So, like, the older and the more established the party, the more constituents they get. If you have a party that doesn't feel the constituent, it loses by default. It's a very bizarre system, right? And again, it's built on seniority. Like, how long have you been there? They even call places strongholds. And stronghold is like a place where almost everyone votes the same, and that vote is more powerful than other places where people vote differently. Like, you have a percentage of people voting Labour and another percentage voting Conservative. So this is why Reform UK made so poorly. It was a party that was established, I think it was like 1 month or so before the election. Didn't have much money to campaign. And on top of that, didn't have the time to actually do the grassroots thing. Like, we live on social media, probably you guys as well that listen to me. So the ones that are terminally online. But in the real world, you actually do need to knock on doors. You do need to be presentable. You do need to talk to people. And they didn't have the time to do this. And this is why they didn't manage to get a lot of seats, because while there were a lot of people that voted for them, I mean, 4 million people is nothing to scoff at, but they were all over the place, and they didn't manage to give Reform UK the seats required in order for them to be influential. So, as usual, everyone says that maybe in the next election, but I don't know. Like, I expect that Labor is going to take advantage of the power and they're going to pass some of the most draconic hate speech laws possible in order to fortify their elections and to make sure that the other political parties do not have the ability to say the things they need to say in order for them to be able to represent the people that need representing. So I don't really have much hopes for the next elections. Already, I have seen the prime minister talking about, oh, the prisons are too crowded. We need to open the prisons, right? Like, what happens when you open the prisons? What crime happens? What happens when crime happens? People talk about it. Well, what happens when people talk about crime? They use hate speech. Oh, so now that we open the prison and we have a lot of place for the political dissidents, that's what my cynical Eastern European Soviet-themed brain is thinking. Like, that's what I would do if I was them. It's like, let us the criminals, let them commit the crime, and when people talk about it, that's the real crime. So that's one of the things. The other thing that I heard they want to do is to dismantle the Rwanda deal. So, like, the Rwanda deal was for asylum seekers that come into the UK. Like they're fleeing war, which is great because Rwanda doesn't have a war, and they would just be taken to Rwanda, a very safe place. Labor doesn't like that. Now, I also heard, I don't know if they're actually going to do it, but if you guys followed the internet memes, that there were a lot of posts by political activists and Labor responding to people saying, well, there's no more room, right? Like, there's no more room in Britain. We already took enough refugees. Let them assimilate a little bit. Jesus fucking Christ, stop taking more. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? There's no more room. Look at the boroughs. Look at the countryside. There's plenty of room there. Right? So, apparently, I think they want to make the boroughs take their fair share, right? So, like, if you're a little town, if you're a small community, and, especially if you fled from London, they're going to be like, well, let's Londonize this place. So, you guys need to take, like, 5,000 immigrants. Oh, now you're complaining? Well, that's hate speech. So, also farms, right? Like, a farm gets shot down. Well, let's make sure there's not another farm going to be built in this area. We're going to build affordable housing for the migrants, right? So, I think we're going to see more of that. Like, that's my prediction. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you voted on it. I mean, kinda, like, Labour or Tories, pretty much the same shit. Like, you can vote for a World Economic Forum affiliated Labour Party member or a World Economic Forum appointed Tory. And it doesn't even matter how you vote. Like in the UK, I can genuinely, unironically say it doesn't matter how you vote. Because Liz Truss was ousted by a banker, as we saw in the interview with her. And she was immediately replaced with someone appointed that no one voted for, right? Like Mr. Sunak. No one voted for Mr. Sunak, despite the fact that the press is like, oh, he's the youngest prime minister ever. I mean, if you can literally appoint whomever you want at that point. It's not a democracy if you can just appoint people. It's I can't really say it's a sham, but it's like a rubber stamp thing. Like you get like just barely enough to call it a democracy, but is it really the will of the people? So that's what's happening in the UK. A lot of people that voted Labour, they voted in protest of the Conservatives. And while people can say, well, it's the same party, it's the same ideology, even though that's not the case because Labour is a little bit more extreme and Conservatives are just driving under the speed limit, the major difference is the politician, the person, right? Like the person that you take their fat ass and you put them in the seat to gorge themselves on their taxpayer money, right? Like, that person is an actual individual. He's a human being, as the left likes to say. And that human being loves shaking hands with other human beings. He loves going to all these parties while there's lockdowns. He enjoys the luxury of your taxpayer money. So when he gets replaced, that human being is very upset, right? Like, he's very upset because him personally isn't going to take the paycheck. He's not going to go to the same parties. He's not going to shake the same hands. Interest groups won't like him. It's difficult to trade when you don't have insider information. Not saying that they do. I mean, of course not. But, they like to know that they could if they wanted. Now, when you do that, it upsets that person, right? It upsets the individual. So that's pretty much what's happening. Like, they got punished. But unfortunately, while the politicians get punished, in the UK, they actually have a system of bureaucrats, right? And those are kind of forever. Like, the civil service class is there to stay. There is a very famous TV show in the UK called Yes Minister. And if you really want to understand how British politics work, just watch that. Like, it's a comedy, but it's a lot of things said in jest. A lot of truth said in jest. And it will highlight exactly how British politics work. And also explains why it doesn't matter if you vote Lib Dem, if you vote Tories, or if you vote Labour. I think like Reform UK may have tried to change something, but as Liz Truss said, like, no, you can't really change it. And now I also heard talks about the Prime Minister wanting to go to Germany so that they can talk how they can get closer to the EU. You know, like literally what the people voted for, right? But yeah, like now Labour has a mandate to do literally whatever the fuck they want. And I think they will use this power in order to solidify their reign for the next elections. And we'll see what happens. I don't think there's going to be improvement in Britain when it comes to the standard of living for most people. I think taxation is going to get even higher. I think a lot of restrictions are going to be put in place. I think the green agenda is going to accelerate to dramatic means. Like, for those of you who haven't visited London, you just don't understand the green cult that they're having. Like, I would see construction sites where they were like, oh, this construction site operates on greenery. I would go to a mall and it was like, oh, these escalator stairs are stopped in order to preserve Mother Gaia. Like, literally everywhere. Every fucking where was like, dude, like, if you come to Romania, world of difference. No, they're absolutely obsessed with that shit. Cashless society, they're going to be trying to push for it. Like, it hasn't worked in many places. Sweden was a country that almost became a cashless society, and they decided to roll back because they realized, oh shit, like, we're kind of killing our elderly with that. Like, they don't know how to use a credit card, or there are some cities up in the fucking mountains and they don't have even access to an ATM. Like, how are they going to use cashless? Right? So we'll see. I mean, hopefully Britain will be a warning for the rest of us, which do have systems of politics that do not have this shit, right? Like, we actually have different ways of organizing the way people vote so that you don't get the situation where someone gets 4 million votes and only 4 seats, right? Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So by looking at Britain, we can predict what happens here, right? Because they're like, a lot of the progressives' arguments are wishful thinking, and they're like, if we do this, then we'll get that. And I will say, no, like, Britain did this, and they got exactly the opposite, so shut the fuck up. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.